Hi everyone, Jessica here from Paper Ink Stamp and welcome back to another card making video. So today we're looking at Simply Cards and Papercraft issue 214 and this set is called Herb Garden. So you get 3 different elements with this magazine. So you get a small embossing folder, you get 3 dies, and then you get this large stamp set that's got different herbs, plant pots, and it's got different kinds of sentiments in here as well. And then those dies, you've got the little sticks where you can write on what the plant is. You've got the plant pot, and then of course then you've got that embossing folder, which is kind of a really nice sort of weaved style embossing folder. So let's take a look at the magazine itself. As always, you've got lots of inspiration in here. There is some free downloadable backing papers as well that will go really lovely with this Herb Garden free gift set. So you can see lots of different ways of using it, different style cards. So you can have the plants coming out of pots, you can have them coming out of really nice teacups, but you could also use those for other stamps as well that you've got in your stash. So there's lots of other projects in here as well. So you've got different, it's like seed packets, they've made some decor. So if you're really into your gardening, this is going to be absolutely perfect. And then they've got other kind of projects in here as well, creating paper watering cans, really, really great. Then we've also got adding a touch of texture. So again, just using different kinds of projects and really stretching this as much as possible. So let's take a look at what's going to be included with the next issue. So the free gift is going to be a mega value floral set. This is called Cherry Blossom, and you've got a 16 piece stamp and coordinating die set. So you're going to create some really lovely kind of spring cards with these. It looks like it's got an extra paper pack in there as well, again probably that you can download from the website. So that's a look at the magazine and then the free gift. So let's go ahead and get started on creating today's card. So the card size I'm going to create today is going to be a mini slimline card. So this is 3.5 by 6 inch. And what I wanted to do was kind of use as many of the elements as possible. So I use a couple of the stamps and then I also use that embossing folder. So what I'm going to do is first of all use the embossing folder, and I'm going to grab a smaller piece of cardstock. So this is going to be my top layer, and I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine a couple of times with that embossing folder, and we're going to create an embossed background. So because this is a smaller embossing folder, it's not going to allow us to create a repeating pattern that looks like you haven't run it through a few different times. So what I'm going to do is line it up with the edge to begin with, and I'm going to run that through the die cutting machine. And what it's going to do around the edge of the embossing folder, it's going to have an imprint of the actual folder itself. If you've ever used embossing folders, you'll kind of know what I mean, and it sort of flattens the edge. But what I'm going to do is run it through a few times, and I'm going to keep moving it along, and I'm going to use that flattened section that the embossing folder creates, and I'm going to create almost like a break, as if it's kind of a wall. You can see it here. I run it through for the last time, and you can see I've got 3 lines that's coming down, and it's given me 4 panels. And this is a really great way of using the embossing folder, trying to create that kind of repeating pattern. And I've left that section along the bottom, so it almost looks like it's just a brick wall. I really love how this has come out, and it's, you know, trying to utilize your embossing folders, just not the way they're intended, is trying to use them to create bigger cards, bigger panels, and I think this actually worked really well. So now we're going to work on creating the main elements for the cards. We're going to do a little bit of stamping and masking, and we're going to create the flower pot and make it look like some of these herbs, flowers are coming out of it. So for this, I'm going to create a mask, first of all, of our flower pot. So I've got a full sticky post-it note here. I'm just roughly stamping on our plant pot, and I'm just going to cut this out right up to that black edge. So once I've cut out my mask, I can go ahead and stamp my plant pot. So I'm going to be stamping 3 of these. I'm going to have 3 next to each other, and I'm going to have them all having lavender come out of them. I'm not a gardener, I don't have a garden at the moment, but I thought the lavender would be quite easy to make sure that I got kind of accurate, because I'm going to colour them in sort of different shades of purple. So what I've got is just a scrap piece of cardstock. I'm using my Memento Tuxedo Black ink. And what I'm doing is just making sure that I've got enough space to be able to have that lavender coming out. So I don't want to bunch them together too much because, like I said, I do want to make sure that I have enough space. So I'm stamping 3 of these, and then once I've stamped these down, I can go ahead and pop my mask on my first plant pot. And then I can stamp my lavender coming out of it. And I'm going to use this time the Versafine Onyx black ink because I'm going to use some watercolours. I wanted it to be a little bit more fluid. I didn't want to use my alcohol markers, so I'm using a waterproof ink. And you can see that I've overlapped then my lavender stamp with that plant pot. When we remove the mask, it then looks like our lavender is coming out of our plant pot. And I'm going to try and do these at sort of slightly different heights, just so they're not all exactly the same. So you can see this one I'm bringing much further down. It's just going to make it look a little bit shorter, or of course then you can make it look taller. It just adds a little bit of variety to your card. So after stamping these images, the first thing I'm going to do is colour in the lavender. So I've decided to use my Hunky Dory Prism brush markers here. So you can see that I've scribbled some of that colour onto the white palette section of my glass mat, and I'm just using a small paintbrush with a little bit of water to pick up that colour. So I didn't want this to be perfect. The images themselves, or the leaves and things, are quite small, so I wanted you to get more of an impression of the colour, so I just kind of went over it, so it was more of a stripe, if you like. But I was, again, wanted to just have it be a little bit more loose and not really kind of too perfect. So what I did is the exact same thing for all 3 of these, but I did them in different shades of purple and slightly pinks, just to get a little bit, again, of variety on the card. In some areas as well, I took the brush marker directly to my stamped image and then used my paintbrush with some water just to help pull that colour out a little bit, but it left some areas with a little bit more depth of colour, which is what I wanted. So once I'd finished all of the lavender plants themselves, I just let that dry naturally a little bit with my heat tool as well. But then I wanted to move on to decorating the plant pots. So I wanted to do something a little bit different with the plant pots, not just sort of colour them in with my alcohol markers or these water brush. I wanted to do a little bit of paper piecing. So I haven't done this before, so I have seen it a couple of times in other videos, but I really wanted to have a go at this. So because we're doing the lavender, I wanted to kind of stick with the purple and pinks theme a little bit here. So I had this just random paper pack in my stash. So I think these are 6 by 6 inch. I'm not sure where they came from, to be honest, but they've got lots of different patterns papers within these kind of pinks and purples and whites that I thought would work perfectly. So what I'm going to do to create the paper piecer is I'm going to stamp our image onto each of these different papers. So I've picked 3 different papers out. I'm going to stamp these on, and basically I'm just going to cut them out. So the bits that I wanted to be sort of decorated on the plant pot was going to be the actual main pot itself, not the top rim. And then you've got those 2 lines near the bottom. I'm going to actually colour those sections in with alcohol markers, make it look more like a regular pot that's then just decorated. If you are going to do a bit of paper piecing, then the main things that I did was look at the areas that were going to be cut out, make sure I got like the right section of the pattern that I wanted. I am using the Versafine Onyx Black. I wanted it to dry relatively quick here. And it's good to use sort of smaller patterns if you're using smaller images as well, just because it's easier to get that kind of full pattern in there. So what I'm going to do is cut my plant pot into 3 sections. So you've got the large section at the top, you've got that really tiny slither in between the 2 lines, and then you've got the very bottom as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is just cut the whole pot out, and what's really great about using this particular image for the first time paper piecing is it's really simple to cut out. It's not too difficult at all. So what I could have done maybe just to make life a little bit easier is I could have taken my alcohol markers and use them on this patterned paper to colour in the 2 stripes on the plant pot, but instead I decided to use my alcohol markers on the actual pot itself, and then, like I said, I'm going to cut this plant pot into 3 sections. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually use the alcohol markers to colour in these pieces, because it doesn't mean that I have to be kind of too neat with it. I can be quite rough because I know I'm going to be covering it all up. And because those stripes are quite small, again, I can go over the lines and it's really not going to make a difference. So I've coloured in all of the rims on my plant pots all at the same time, and then I'm going to use my tape runner to add some adhesive to my first piece. And because I've cut on the black line, so you've still got a little bit of that black outline, and then you've got the black outline that's on the image itself, it sort of blends really seamlessly, so you don't want to cut all of the black off. I would recommend still leaving a little bit of it. It just gives it a little bit more of a polished look. Again, like I said, it makes it look a little bit more seamless. But you can see then we've popped that one into place. Then I can go ahead and it's a little bit fiddly, but then cut out that middle section and then that bottom section as well. And again, then I'm just going to use my tape runner. You could use liquid glue if you wanted to here, but I thought it might have just been a little bit easier using my tape runner, because then I know I can get adhesive across the whole section. I'm not going to have glue squirting out anyway because these pieces are quite small. It's just going to give a much neater finish. So you can see I've cut the bottom piece out there, and then the last piece we've got to put in is then that tiny middle section. When I came to do the other plant pots, what I did do was I cut the smaller pieces out first, just because it made it easier to hold. So I kind of did it the other way round. The last piece I cut out would have been then the big section. So here we're just going to add our piece of adhesive, so you can see just how small that section is. Add some adhesive to this, then we can pop this onto our plant pot, and that is then our first one finished. And it just adds something a bit more detail that we've added that rim to, and then that decorative piece at the bottom. So you can see then we've got a decorated plant pot, and I think this is just really nice, something a little bit different, and again just adds a little bit more interest to the card. So I did the others, like I said, in the exact same way, apart from just changing the way that I cut it out. The process is exactly the same. So you can see that I'm just adding this very last bit to my last pot, and you can see the other two. I think they just look really great, really effective, and using then those different patterned papers, I think this has worked really, really well. And I'll hold these up to the camera a little bit closer just so you can see sort of that finished look. Paper piecing would definitely be easier if you had bigger images, but I really love how these have come out. Just wait for this to focus up. You can see that it's just really kind of effortless. You're not having to colour things in, and you're getting that pattern on there as well. So I'm really happy with how these have turned out. And now these are finished, I'm going to go ahead and just fussy cut all the way around it and just leave a nice white border. So unfortunately here I lost a little bit of footage, but what I did was added some splatter onto my background and then onto my plant pot. So I added some Perfect Pearls and splattered that on. That gave me then the silver shimmer, and then to the background itself I used some of the Prism Jelly Bean ink and just mixed it with a little bit of water and splattered that on as well. Again, just to add a little bit of extra detail to that background, just so it wasn't so white. And you can see our background pan out a little bit more clearly there as well, and you can see that we've created those 4 kind of smaller panels, using that embossing folder, and again just doing it in a little bit more of a creative way. So I wanted to create a mat and layer for our card as well, so I decided to pick out one of the patterns papers that I used to paper piece our plant pot, and I'm just going to cut this down to size just to create, like I said, a nice sort of colourful border around our white panel. So to stick this panel down, I just used some double-sided tape because you do have that embossed image. I wanted to make sure that it was down flat as best as I could. And then I'm going to go ahead and attach our panel onto our blank card base. And I'm going to use some thin foam for this, again just to add a little bit of dimension but not too much. And then we can go ahead and start assembling the rest of our pieces, our plant pots and a sentiment onto our card. I'm also going to add some of this thinner foam tape onto the back of the plant pots. So they're all going to be the same height, but we're going to kind of just position them a little bit more interestingly. And obviously, because then we created these images with the lavender being at different heights coming out of the pots, that really does help as well. But before I actually stick these onto the card, I need to think about what sentiments I'm going to use. So there's lots of different sentiments in here, of course, all herb themed, garden themed. I decided to just go with a little bit more of a generic sentiment for this card. So the sentiment I picked was Grown with Love, so again, quite generic. I'm going to pop this onto just an acrylic block, and I'm trying to get it as straight as possible. And then I'm going to stamp it in some of the Prism World of Colour. This is the purple velvet colour, so this is quite a deep purple. So I thought I'd kind of stick with that pinks and purples theme there. And I'm going to stamp this onto some sort of lavender coloured cardstock. I'm not sure where this is from. I think it was just a piece that I had just in my scraps pile, so I've just pulled this out again just to make the most of it. I've stamped this onto just one end that fits kind of perfectly, and then I can go ahead and trim our sentiment down. So after I cut out my sentiment, I just rounded the corners with that X-cut small corner cutter, and then we can go ahead and assemble all of the pieces onto the front of our card, just using again that foam tape that I've already popped onto the back of the plant pots, and then I use just a little bit more for that sentiment as well. So after I completed the front, I did decide then just to stamp a couple of the images on the inside of the card, just to sort of carry on the design. So I used a couple of my Prism World of Colour ink pads, and then I just stamped that heather a couple of times, and then there was a sort of stick image as well, and then they've got lots of labels for all of the different plant stamps that they've got included. So I just stamped then the lavender inside, and then I just coloured the actual image in again with the same ink. So holding it up close, you can see that perfect pearl sparkle on there as well from the splatter. We got a little bit of splatter on that background, and then we have got the inside decorated as well. So that is the card that I created using this Herb Garden free set from Simply Cards and Papercraft issue 214. So that is it for today's card. If you do like it, please give this video a thumbs up. It really does mean a lot to me. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do so, and hit that notification bell as well so you don't miss out on any future videos. So thanks very much for watching, and happy crafting.